Joining us now is Morgan Griffith, and he knows a thing or two about energy, being in Southwest Virginia and representing all those coal miners in Southwest Virginia. Joining us, Congressman, good to have you, man.
Good to be with you this morning.
So Nancy Pelosi all fired up, basically saying that this is the Trump shutdown. Look, I want the wall. I want the $5 billion. I know you do also. It makes sense. But every time there's a government shutdown, Republicans get hammered and blamed. It's before Christmas. For the life of me, I cannot see how that strategy makes any sense at all.
Well, there was a slightly different strategy. Now, I preferred I wish we had only done the extension for 1 week so that we would have that fight this week. I think that makes more sense. But I will tell you there's a lot of pressure on the Senate. The House will pass something that has $5 billion in it. I think we have the votes to do that. The question is, will the Senate and what will Schumer do? In reality, the Democrats probably could give us this, except that Nancy Pelosi, in my opinion, is still struggling to get the votes, and she's showing that she's a real warrior, and she's using this opportunity to try to bolster her chances of getting sufficient votes on the floor.
So politics involved. She has to show her base that she can stand up to the president, whether or not it makes sense for the country. But, she challenged the president yesterday in the on-air negotiation, which was very interesting, Congressman, in and of itself, and said, well, go ahead. If you have the votes, go ahead. Get them. She said, you don't have the votes in the House because you can't even get them in your own caucus. True or false?
I don't think that's true. Now, you never know until the votes go up on the board, but I believe we have the votes there for $5 billion. And I do think that when the vote comes up, the House will pass it.
So the president said he was not favored that because he said, look, it's dead in the water in the Senate, and he wanted a bigger compromise that everybody could agree to. But I think here you're right. I think the president, I think the legislative body is the first body, and they have a duty, and that's to try to pass a budget, right? And so you got to pass it. But it would certainly be telling Congressman Griffith, if out of your own caucus of 50 people leaving, lame duckers, you couldn't even get funding for that. That would be a shocker, wouldn't it?
Well, it would certainly be disappointing, and it would indicate why there's been so much controversy over the last few years trying to get votes done. And sometimes it has been perhaps leadership, but a lot of times it's just been leadership struggling with the fact that we have a fair number of people who are more liberal than most of the Republican Party in the country is.
So if the House were to pass this, walk us through, Congressman, what this time frame would be, because we're faced here with a deadline. Nobody wants to see a shutdown, 3 days before Christmas.
Right.
It just makes no sense.
No one wants the shutdown, so they will continue to negotiate. We'll continue to see what we can do. A lot of the folks don't want to come back even next week, but some of the folks don't want to come back the week between Christmas and New Year's to finish up things. That's why you saw McConnell saying we may have to come back. He was talking about criminal justice reform. But a lot of folks don't want to do that, particularly those who are not coming back either by choice or by election results. And so I suspect you'll see something on the 20th or the 21st, either a compromise that's been worked out between the parties, where everybody comes out and says, see, we really did fight and we got something, or you'll see us come in and the House will vote on something, and then we'll see what the Senate does and whether or not the president has to veto it.
And so there could be compromise on his part, right? They might come back with $3.5 million, and it beats $1.6 million, so you might have to make a deal there, right?
Right. That's right.
So we just kind of have to see how this plays out, Congressman. So is there a chance that they just do another, what are those 2-week CRs and to get past the holidays?
I don't think so. I would certainly hope not, because the problem is eventually you're going to be into the new Congress, and Nancy Pelosi or some other Democrat will hold the gavel.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then that's going to make it much more difficult.
Absolutely. Then we're not in the driver's seat in the House. They pull up whatever bill they want to, and then we have to vote yay or nay. and send that over to the Senate, where they have to play the Senate games that give more power to the minority than the minority deserves.
We're with Congressman Morgan Griffith, Republican from the 9th District of Virginia. That's the Southwest Virginia area. So, Congressman, the justice reform, have you had a chance to look at it in depth at all?
I have not, but I hear good things. And, when you're hearing good things from people on both sides of the aisle, it's probably a good idea. But there are some issues in there that have been raised about, they're changing some of the mandatory minimums, which have previously relied only on multiple strikes in the federal system. Mm-hmm. And while they lowered the number of years, they then said it could also count state crimes. And that may be the right decision, but the idea was to try to reduce the number of people imprisoned for long periods of time, particularly when their crimes might be small. You throw the state crimes in where, some misdemeanors can actually count towards that, or some felonies may count towards that in some states. And all of a sudden, you increased by 100-fold the number of people who then are getting the maximum sentence. While that sentence may have been reduced, you've increased the number of people subject to that sentence. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of the Senate in the final package.
And so what will the House's involvement be?
Well, it should go to committee. We'll see. It should go to committee, but it may come straight to the floor because of the time delay.
Okay, let's get to Khashoggi and the Saudis and the U.S. participation in the Yemeni civil war. I believe that the Senate is going to have 67 votes to get us out of there. The president and our Secretary of Defense right now, James Madison, also Secretary Pompeo, and other people in the military have said that that's not a good idea, that we need to continue with that because of the Houthis and Iranian aggression. But I really believe the Senate is going to get to the 67 on it. What about the House? Because if you can't get whatever the 2/3 is, whatever the number is, then you're not going to carry that, because even though the president campaigned against getting involved in this war and said he would get out, who's been talked into staying, how will that play out?
I'm not sure how that will play out. There's a rule vote coming up today or tomorrow where there's going to be an amendment added to a rule that says, or it's going to be in the rule that says that we can't take up the issue right now. I'm inclined to support that so I can get more information. We are not having a House briefing until Thursday morning. It seems rather premature to have the vote and then hold the briefing. But I am concerned. I do think we probably ought not be in that conflict, and I think the entire AUMF authorization of the use of military force that's currently in effect needs to come back to the House. We have not voted on one since I've been here. I've been here 8 years. We're dealing with the 2001-2002 authorization of the use of military force. It's wrong. This is an area where Tim Kaine and I myself agree, and Justin Amash in the House. I mean, you've got people all over the board who are like, wait a minute, there's a separation of powers, and we have the obligation to oversee this, and we're not doing it. And Congress needs to do that, and that's one of the issues that may get more votes for this than might otherwise happen. But at this point, I think I'd like to get the briefing before I take a vote.
Well, Paul Ryan wouldn't bring the new AUMF to the floor. He had several chances. The last time was in, I think, got hooked to appropriations, and he put it in rules, as you know, and those that understand how Congress makes the sausage, when the speaker puts something in rules, that's basically the oblong box of any bill. That's the killing field that died there. McConnell did the same thing in the Senate, so it never came up. Pelosi has said she would take it to the floor, but I don't have any confidence in that either. Congressman, you're going to get back in January, and there's going to be a Democratic speaker. You're in the minority. How does that change your work life?
Well, I think it changes it substantially. It was just a matter of coming up with a different formula. One, I have to figure out ways to put sticks into the spokes of the wheel of the Democrats moving forward on policies that I think are bad for the country, and slow that down and stop it if I can. Likewise, on things where there may be some agreement, as we just talked about the AUMF, working with people on the other side of the aisle to try to find ways to get them to bring something to the floor that's acceptable to most of us in the House. And so it'll be different, but as you may recall, I served for a number of years in the Virginia House in the minority, and so it'll be different, but I'm looking forward to the challenge, and it'll be interesting.
Yeah, well, not only did you serve in the minority, but you rose up to leadership very quickly. So Chap Peterson told me the other day, there's another Republican speaker. It's going to be Morgan Griffith, the Speaker Griffith.
Well,
that's what he said.
Chap is very kind, and I did get what I call battlefield promotions when we were in the minority in the House, and but we'll just have to see how it all works out. But I look forward to the challenge.
So, and I appreciate that. Thank you. So now today, last night, Democrats once again, it's like they just can't. It's just, I don't know. It's almost like some of them have political Tourette's. They just can't help themselves, right? So they're going to take power, and now last night. They're back on impeachment. Like they're going to look at impeachment. You've got a couple of them saying that the president is eventually going to jail over the Stormy Daniels payment. And you've even got Democratic Senator Chris Coons, who's normally a pretty level-headed guy, saying that, he would be inclined to support impeachment, even though he doesn't even know what the charges are. I mean, let me just be serious, okay? The president's done nothing that would lead to any kind of impeachment since he's been in office. And, the Democrats are going to fire off the subpoena cannon and try to get his tax returns and, find things he did in 1985. But I know you're not going to give advice to your Democratic colleagues, but, I mean, don't you think that they haven't even taken the gavel? And instead of talking about one thing they're going to do for the American people, their number one issue now is impeaching the president who has been convicted or charged with nothing. How do you figure this?
Well, they're looking at primaries, and their base is all stirred up, and in some of those areas that they represent, like, and I always mispronounce the name, so I apologize, but Ocasio-Cortez.
Right.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. In her area, that's the people think this is obviously the right thing to do, and they're demanding it. And so the Democrats have a dilemma. I mean, in reality, I think that Ocasio-Cortez is actually the new leader of the Democrat Party, and that wing of the party, that socialist wing, is going to be driving the policies. And impeachment's number one, but it's not going to succeed in the end. And so we have to continue to try to do the business of America and keep things moving forward in spite of all the noise. And, if one thing can be said, and sometimes Trump contributes to that noise, and I've been critical of his contributions to the noise, but he operates very well in that kind of an environment. So it may act, the president's going to make our jobs more difficult in the House and the Senate. But if that's the course the Democrats want to take, they'll show the American people there's a reason why they were out of power for a while, and it'll bring us back quicker.
So Miss Ocasio-Cortez, I think she's 26 or 27 years old. She was just over the minimum to get elected to Congress, which I think is 25. So she just got elected. She was a waitress, which is a noble profession, and has not served a day in government doing anything. Tom Perez, the chairman of the DNC, called her the new leader, the new wave of the Democrats. I forget the exact. He called her the future of the Democratic Party, and now you're basically saying that she's a de facto titular leader. How do you accomplish that when you haven't even been sworn in yet?
Well, you've got social media, and you've got all that out there, and then you have the fact that people don't understand. Sometimes you got to learn these things, and she is, in fact, the leader of that wing of the party, and that wing of the party is now the majority in the Democrat Party, that socialist wing. So, she is, if not the leader, or one of the leaders, and it'll be interesting to see if she gets any votes for Speaker on the floor.
So help us understand this. I mean, when we look at the leadership of the Democratic Party, and maybe I should have this conversation with Ben Tribbett, but, you look at Pelosi, 78 years old, and Steny Hoyer, 73 or 74 years old, and a lot of the other Democrats that serve in leadership that are the face of the Democratic House caucus. And you say to yourself, okay, Ocasio-Cortez, she represents, 5%? But what you're saying is a lot of these people that got elected are aligned with her, right? I mean...
That is correct. A lot of them are philosophically aligned with her, and that wing of the party seems to be dominant, of the Democrat Party seems to be dominant. I don't understand all of their thinking, but it seems to be a revolution within the Democrat Party, and the old guard is losing, and it's just a question of whether it's this January or sometime in the near future that she or someone else from the socialist wing of the Democrat Party takes up. I really believe the old-line Democrats that were so popular for many years in Virginia are dead and gone, and it's just a matter of a few dinosaurs hanging on.
If White House staff is tuned into our show right now, senior advisors to the president, what would be, Morgan Griffith, your recommendation to President Trump right now in this budget negotiation?
Well, I might not have, laid the mantle of shutdown on my shoulders last night, but that having been done, I would say, go ahead. You've picked a battle plan. Let's go forward. Let's fight for this. Let's get what we can. Be ready to compromise to keep the government from shutting down if it's a reasonable compromise. But just like, the Democrats want it all, we can't let them have it all, because if we start off on this 2 years with them getting everything that they want, then we lose. And the American people lose because we need border security. That's what we need. And the president is right. This is worth a fight. I hope we don't have a shutdown, but it is worth the fight because people out there want to secure our southern border, love immigrants, want to reform immigration, but let's do it to make sure that we do it legally so that people can come in who want to share in the American dream, but not cross our borders illegally. That's not the way to start this process.
All right, we're out of time. I want to thank Congressman Morgan Griffith for being with us, Republican Congressman, Southwest Virginia. That's the 9th District. Congressman, it's always an honor to have you on, sir. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time. And we will see you next week. More information, go to griffith.house.gov. I finally memorized your website. It's actually easy, Griffith. If you can't remember that, you got bigger issues than I have.
Yep.
Congressman, thanks for being with us. Say hi to your family.
Thanks. Merry
As always,
Christmas.
we will see you soon.